The April 9, 1152, Raymond II of Tripoli, great-grandson of Raymond of Saint-Gilles and an important Crusader leader, leaves his city to welcome visitors. A few minutes later, a small group of men approaches him. Without a word, one of them jumps on Raymond and stabs him with a knife. The count falls to the ground and is immediately finished by other attackers. In Tripoli, the Crusaders look for someone to blame, and very quickly, one name comes up again and again, the Hashashin, also called the Nizari Ismailis. This group, famous throughout the Middle Age, is still surrounded today by many false ideas. Some of them came from incomplete medieval stories, and others are made bigger by popular culture, especially video games like Assassin's Creed. In this video, we will explain the relations and conflict between the Assassins and the Crusaders. First, it is important to remember that the Assassins did not begin in Syria. The movement first appears in Persia at the end of the 11th century, around the fortress of Almut and the figure of Hassan Isaba. But it is not in Persia that the Crusaders meet them most directly. Real contact became possible mainly when the Nizari created a branch in Syria at the start of the 12th century. And this is where everything changed. In Syria, the Nizari settled in the middle of a land fought over by the Latin states, the rulers of Damascus and the lords of Aleppo. For the first time, Crusaders and Assassins become direct neighbors, sometimes only a few dozen kilometers apart. However, before the political killings and the first clear contact reported by the writers between 1160 and 1170, we have no written proof of a relations between Crusaders and Assassins. The sources of the time say nothing. No text clearly mention a meeting or a treaty. But how could they never have met? The Assassins and Crusaders lived only a few dozen kilometers from each other. In such a situation, it is almost impossible to believe that they completely ignored each other. After all, the movement begins in Persia with Hassan Isaba, the master of Alamut, who guides his followers from a distance. At the beginning of the 12th century, he sent his first trusted missionaries in Syria. This is the man who lays the foundation of the Syrian Nizari community. This happens during a violent and unstable period. In Damascus, around 1126, hundreds of Ismailis are killed by the emir, the survivors scatters, and the Nizaris understand that their survival depends on the mountain. From that moment on, they turn their effort toward the highlands that rise above the Latin states. Later, between 1132 and 1141, taking advantage of local rivalries, they seized key strongholds, Kalmut, Al-Kaf, Kawabi, and later Masyaf. These mountain fortresses are not linked by one continuous territory. They form an island network of stone strongholds, isolated but connected. Each fortress became a refuge and a center of resistance. It is important to note that after the First Crusades, the conquerors do not return to Europe. They stay and create 4 Latin states. But for the Nizaris, only 2 truly matter: the Principality of Antioch in the north and the County of Tripoli in the southwest. Once settled, the Assassins now stand face to face with the Crusaders, and the distances are short. Katmut is only 90 kilometers from Antioch. Kawabi is about 60 kilometers from Tripoli. 1 day on horseback is enough for Latin knights to reach the foot of their fortress. Pawns of Tripoli cannot ignore this new master of the mountain who was the roads leading into the heart of Syria. And Bohemond II, Prince of Antioch, already know how fragile is his state, trapped between powerful enemies. For him, these fortified communities are both a threat and an opportunity, a possible buffer against rival Muslim power. And another fact, some Arab writers even reported that the Assassins may have paid a tribute to the Templars to keep peace. Truth or rumors, the idea spreads. Between Crusaders and Assassins, there is not only war, but also a possibility of a deal. Yet the Crusaders are not the most dangerous enemy. To the southeast, on the wide Syrian plain, stands Damascus, a stronghold of Sunni power. For them, the Assassins are seen as heretic. The memory of the Battle of Karbala is still on the mind of everyone. To the east, another threat rises. The weak-kneed Seljuks give way to the Zengids. Imad ad-Din Zengi takes Mosul, then Aleppo. His goal is clear: to unite Syria and remove all the rival groups. For him, The assassins' fortress are not a neighbor to tolerate, but a problem to destroy. Looking at the situation, the assassins are caught between the Crusaders, Damascus, and the Zengids. They have only one real option: survive with their fortress, their mountains, and a strategy based on patience and temporary deal. As a teeny minority without the ability to raise large armies like their enemies, they turn toward the ways of war based on infiltrations and targeted killing. When the assassins settled in the mountains of Jibal Ansariya, the political situation quickly brings them into indirect contact with the Latin states. At that time, these states are ruled by lords who know the lands and its danger well, such as Pons of Tripoli and Bohemond II. These men leave almost nothing in writing about the assassins, but their military decisions show that they take the mountain situation into account. The roads they must secure sometimes pass close to Kadmut or Kawabi. Small Latin garnisons watch the valley, and some short operations to protect supply groups show that the Crusaders include the Nizari presence in their planning. Arab sources also mention that the assassins may, at what time, pay the money to the Templars in the region. This type of deals is realistic. The Templars control several important points between Tortosa, Tripoli, and the inland roads, and sometimes demand payment for protection. Several Frankish lords also show through their actions that they see the assassins as a local force to watch. Raymond of Poitiers, Prince of Antioch, led several campaigns in the 1130s and the 1140s to strengthen his control near this area. These actions do not directly target the assassins, but they show constant attention toward the mountain groups. In these conditions, it is likely that short contact took place, requests for passage, local talk, limited agreements. But no Latins or Arab sources record any official dialogue before the second half of the 12th century. All that changed around the 1160s. At that time, the central figure of the Syrian assassins appeared, Rashid ad-Din Sinan, known to the Crusade readers as the Old Man of the Mountain. His arrival marks a turning point. Contacts become clear, tension grows stronger, and the readers finally begin to speak openly about the assassins. Around the 1160, the leader of the Syrian Nizari became Rashid ad-Din Sinan. He settled at Masyaf in the Hama region of central Syria. From that date on, the chroniclers follow his action on a regular basis, but the first major clash between Crusaders and Nizari take place before he came to power. On April 9, 1152, in the coastal city of Tripoli, Count Raymond II of Tripoli is attacked as he leaves the city walls. Several men approach him, stab him with a knife, and leave him to the ground. The Frankish writers William of Tyre said that the attackers struck without hesitation and did not try to flee in confusion. Muslim writers also confirmed that the killers were Nizaris. This is the first time a Crusader ruler is officially killed by the assassins. In the years that follow, the Crusaders do not launch a large attack against the Nizari fortress. According to William of Tyre, the Nizari pay money to the Order of the Temple to guarantee the safety of certain roads between the interior of Syria and the coast. In simple terms, this allows supply groups to travel without being attacked, and the Nizari fortress are not targeted by Templar forces. These are practical deals based on money and security, not on religion. In 1174, a major change takes place in the east. Saladin takes Damascus and then quickly expand his control over inner Syria for the Nizari. This means they now face a strong and organized Muslim power. In 1175, a first attempt is made to kill Saladin during a military campaign between Homs and Aleppo in the northern Syria. The attack fails. In 1176, a second attempt is launched. This time, Nizaris enter Saladin's camps at night. One of them reaches the Sultan directly in his tent. Saladin is wounded, but his coat of mail blocked the blow. The Muslim writers Ibn al-Athir states that the attacker was close enough to touch him with his own hand. After the attack, Saladin decides to ensure with military force. In the Hama region, his army moves west and surrounds the fortress of Masyaf, where Sinan's headquarters are located. The siege begins. The machines are set up. The army prepares for an assault. But the siege stops suddenly. Ibn al-Tahir simply writes that Saladin withdrew. Abu Shama speaks of a treat to send to the Sultan. None describe a major battle. None mention a clear treaty. What is certain is that Masyaf is not taken and Saladin abandoned the situation. After these events, Sinan's position changed. He has survived the direct attack by the most powerful Muslim leader of the region. This gently strengthened his political weight among the Muslim and the Crusader. Shortly after this, William of Tyr reports an important event. Envoys from the assassins go to the Frankish leaders. He speaks of talks as a possible deal. He also writes that they claim to be ready to cooperate against the Sunni Muslims. He even mentioned, from his Christian point of view, a possible conversion, but nothing's allowed this to be seriously confirmed. What is certain is that from this moment on, the Nizaris enter a real diplomacy with the Frankish states. They no longer only attack, they negotiate. By the end of the 1170s, several facts are clearly established in the sources. A Crusader count had been killed by the Nizari. A payment system exists with the Templars. 2 attacks have been carried against Saladin. The siege of Masyaf had been stopped without the fortress falling, and discussions have taken place between Nizari and Frankish leaders. The assassins are no longer only a hidden group in the mountain. They have become a real political actor, able to act against the Crusaders, with the Crusaders, and against the great Muslim leaders. In 1190, a new crusade arrived in the east. This is the Third Crusade. 2 large western armies land on the coast of the Levant, one after the other. That of the King of England, Richard Lionheart, and that of the King of France, Philip Auguste. The main area of fighting is on the Palestinian and Lebanese coast, Acre, Jaffa, and the region of Tyr. In July 1191, after a siege of almost 2 years, the city of Acre falls to the Crusaders. Richard Lionheart arrives by the sea. Philip Auguste is already present. Soon after the capture of the city, Philip leaves to the east to return to France. Richard remains alone at the head of the crusade. At that time, the Nizaris are still set in their Syrian fortress around Masyaf. Shortly after Richard settles on the coast, envoys from the assassins come to him. This episode is reported by several Western writers. The envoys propose a deal. They offer their help against Saladin in exchange for protection and political recognition. In simple terms, their offer is clear. The Nizaris can eliminate some Richard's enemy throughout a target killing. In return, they ask to be protected against a possible Frankish attack. In other words, they offer the Crusaders the use of their assassination service. Richard officially refused this offer. He does not wish to appear with a group known for political killing, but the very fact is that these actions show that even in the end of the 12th century, the assassins are still trying to play on all sides. In 1191 and 1192, the war between Richard and Saladin is mainly fought along the coast between Acre and Jaffa. The great battles on this period, such as Arsuf, directly oppose the Frankish and the Ayyubid armies. The assassins do not take part as military force, their role remains indirect. But in April 1192, a major event suddenly placed the Nizaris back at the center of Crusader politics. On April 29, 1192, in Tyr, on the coast of today's Lebanon, Conrad of Montferrat, recently chosen as king of Jerusalem, is murdered in the street by 2 men dressed as monks. They stab him several times. Witnesses arrest them on the spot. Under questioning, they say that they belong to the assassins. The question of who ordered the murder immediately became central. 3 possibilities appear in the source: an action decided by the assassins themselves, an order from Saladin, or an indirect involvement of Richard the Lionheart. What is certain is that the arrested killers are indeed Nizaris, that operation was prepared a long time in advance, and that its political impact is immediate. A few days after Conrad's death, Isabella of Jerusalem marries Henry of Champagne, a close ally to Richard the Lionheart. The balance of power in the Holy Land is overturned. The following years, in 1192, Richard and Saladin sign a truce. The Third Crusade ends without Jerusalem being taken back by the Crusaders. Richard leaves the east by the sea from the coast of Palestine. From that time, Western writers almost completely stopped mentioning the assassins in Frankish affairs. Their direct role in the great events of the Crusade end with the death of Conrad of Montferrat, recently chosen as king of Jerusalem. After 1192, the Nizaris continue to exist in Syria, but they no longer take part of the great clashes between Crusaders and Muslims. The center of the war shift, the Great Western Crusades lost strength, relations between Franks and Assassins enter more as a marginal phase. When we look at all those events, we can see that the relation between Assassins and the Crusaders were never simple. They fought each other, avoid each other, negotiate, and sometimes even use the same enemies. At certain moments, they have common interest. At other times, they fought each other directly. But in the end, they never became true allies. They remained potential enemies, locked in the same space, forced to deal with one another. In the geopolitics of the medieval Middle East, working with an enemy one day did not mean that you would not fight him the next day. And that is exactly what the history of contact between Crusaders and Assassins show.